Welcome to the Critical Window, Brain Building in the First 3 Years. Join us in discussing how parents, healthcare professionals, experts in early childhood development, and community agencies can support a child's first 3 years of development. We unpack the science and share practical strategies for giving every child the best possible start. I'm so excited about our conversation today. And I know that I'm going to ask you a couple questions that you and I just talked about a week or so ago. But as I mentioned, when you and I were meeting at the coffee shop, there's so much good information here that I wanted to capture and be able to share out to a broader audience. So that's why I'm delighted to be able to record this conversation with you today, Chris. Well, let me contextualize how I came to hear about Team Dad and then subsequently get to know you. And I think this really lays the foundation for why I'm so interested in capturing this conversation and sharing it with a broader audience, because I don't think many people know about the work that's available, the peer support, the mentorship, and personal growth development that Team Dad provides. So about 2 months ago, I think, I was attending Shower Expo. Those are held in Escambia County each year, alternating locations, more downtown centralized, and then in our up north in our more rural areas. Not only does Escambia County host baby shower expos, but at least across the panhandle, because I was attending one a month later and saw Team Dad representation there. So I was at the one in Escambia County, saw you come through with your t-shirt, Team Dad. I saw that you were affiliated with Healthy Start, and I was getting to know Healthy Start, the programs that they offer, and Allison Anderson, your executive director. So I was really curious, like, okay, well, what is this about? And I didn't know if it was isolated to Escambia County or a state or national program. And then, as mentioned, I was at another baby expo about a month or so later in Destin, Fort Walton area. Again, a little bit larger expo, but saw representation of Team Dad there. And then I guess the trifecta was I was attending a Civicon event where we bring in monthly national researchers, forward-thinking innovators, just to talk about ways that we can pour into our community, think about how can we build up a vibrant community, maybe do things differently or learn from what other communities are doing. But this particular one was focused on maternal infant health. We had researchers from Children's National up in DC, and they were talking about studies and research they had done around maternal mental health and infant health. One of the comments from the audience was, why do I not see representation of dads? Why are we not talking about the role that dads play? Why isn't there more attention around fathers and dads and how they play into this ecosystem of caring for moms and children? And I remember distinctly, Allison Anderson was sitting to my right behind me, and she stood up and she said, we have a fatherhood program. We have a program called Team Dad that's dedicated to supporting dads, to walking alongside them, to helping them to be the best father, dad, male role model that they can be. And so I applauded her, as did others in the audience. And I thought, okay, that's the last straw. I need to find out more about Team Dad and what they're doing here locally and more about them in other areas across Florida. So without further ado, Chris, tell us a little bit about Team Dad, what you offer, support, program services, and then we'll get into how you came to get involved with Team Dad.
Sure. Team Dad it's an in-home, so it's a home visiting service. We work with dads to become engaged. So our primary target is prenatal to 3 years old. So it's the same age range as Healthy Start. And that's why we align with Healthy Start. So the history of Team Dad, it started in 2023 statewide as a statewide initiative. The governor felt like there needed to be some fatherhood programs. So Team Dad was implemented. And really what we do is we work to engage or have dads engage with their children. There's a lot of power in presence. So our goal is to work with dads to engage with their children. So we go over things in our curriculum, like what informs their idea of fatherhood. So family history, what it means to be a man, things like that. And then we talk about how they interact with other people. So that includes, getting in touch with their feelings, how they manage their feelings. We have a coping curriculum we add in there. We go into communication, discipline, and then we get into, okay, what are our tools for fathering? And that includes co-parenting. It also includes how we interact with our kids, ways to be involved, ways to achieve some work-family balance. Even if you have a high-demand job, you still have that opportunity to really be involved with your kids. You don't have to be there all the time to be a presence in their life.
Well, you encapsulated that really, really well. And when we talked most recently, I was just so fascinated by the depth and breadth of the curriculum that you're using, because as you just mentioned, it touches on so many important topics. One of which I love is what informed your role as a father? Like what experiences did you have? How does that inform how you're going to move forward and parent it? And it may be, and we can get into this, you work with some fathers who maybe already have children. So maybe this is an opportunity where they may want to change some behaviors or, have a different outlook or how they interact with their children, maybe based on some past experiences. Before we get too far down the road with Team Dad, talk to me a little bit, Chris, about how you came to work with Team Dad, because I think there's a really interesting intersection with some of your past work experience that shows up here.
I've always been really passionate about fatherhood, but I spent most of my career, a long career, in public safety. I worked in the fire service, I worked in EMS. Most recently, but before here, I was a 911 dispatcher for almost 19 years. It was time to move on from that. I honestly didn't know that there were jobs in the fatherhood sphere. I was working on my master's in mental health counseling, which I've since finished. I found this job. I felt like it aligned with my goals. And like I said, I've always been passionate about fatherhood. I've written articles on fatherhood a long time ago when my son was young. And so it was just felt like a really good fit, I think, on my part and on Healthy Start's part.
Absolutely. Well, I know that they're lucky to have you, and I want to bring to the conversation your past work experiences. And I'm going to pause here. I think life is so interesting, the beautiful tapestry of life, how our paths ebb and flow and curve and take different directions that were unforeseen to us 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but how you see it when you get to our age and you can step back and kind of see how things in your past show up and position you for that next step in your journey. And I really hear that as I continue to spend more time with you. When I think about 911 and fire rescue and public safety, my mind goes to those are often moments of crisis, episodic crisis. And so you have spent time working with people, of which many of those I'm sure were males, where they were in crisis and you had to quickly triage and help make decisions to position the person or persons you're working with to a better outcome. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
How do you see that showing up in the work that you do now with Team Dads, that kind of triage mentality and a lifeline for resources and hope?
I think it kind of allows me to meet dads where they are because I have experienced all the crises. And so when a dad comes to me, if a dad is in crisis, I try to make myself available to all of them. But it also allows me to kind of take a step back and look at, okay, where's this dad in their fatherhood journey and what do we really need to concentrate on? So it's kind of multifaceted, I guess. It allows me to kind of take that analytical look and see where dad is and what we need to focus on. But also, I do have dads that I'll go meet them. They're like, I can't do a session today. I just really need to talk. So, that's what we do is we talk because, yes, we're educating, but we're also supporting and mentoring. And so sometimes it's just really important to take that time with the dads.
That's one of the things that I think you would agree is so powerful about this particular program is you are meeting dads where they are. It's not an online curriculum. While you do have that available, it's you walking alongside them and with your past experience, and congratulations on your most recent graduate program. You understand the power of connection. And there's something physiological when you're meeting with someone one-on-one, your heartbeats sync up. There's an exchange that's happening when people are in connection, in community together. And I think that is really the powerhouse of the Team Dad program. And it does in some ways limit the caseload because there's only currently one Chris to work with these families, but when you're working with a dad, you're very intentional. I believe that you mentioned to me the goal is to meet weekly, so you're not letting too much time pass. You're available 24/7 to them, and more specifically to what you just mentioned, showing up and meeting them where they are. You know your curriculum and you know the course content and those areas that have been identified, key areas that most fathers need to work through tactically. But if a dad isn't ready, they're in crisis, there's something that is causing them to be distracted, you meet them where they are and work through that. I think when we think about the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, the different ways our body reacts to stress and crisis, you can't take new things in and process. That blood flow slows down, that prefrontal cortex is not working. So again, I think your experiences and your education and knowledge allows you to kind of take in a quick comprehensive intake of where the dad is and then adjust accordingly. And I so appreciate that. And I know the fathers that you work with do as well.
Right. And it's not lost on me. I learn a lot from them along the way as well. They teach me. I work with dads of all walks of life, so a lot about perceptions and worldviews. Sometimes we need to adjust our worldview to better align with the dad and help them out.
So to your point, if we listen, we can learn a lot about meeting people where they are and understanding. So seek to understand first. I think there's great value in that. And the short time that you and I have spent together, I see that in the way that you listen, you pause, you communicate, you restate what you heard. And that's an important life skill in and of itself that you model. Talk to us a little bit how fathers come to work with you, because you mentioned prenatal to age 3 is your sweet spot, because we do know that healthy families, healthy babies, we know that the first 3 years of a child's development, 80 to 85% of that brain architecture is being built through how dads show up, how they respond, how they discipline, how they talk. All those things are so very important in those first 3 years. But how does a dad come to work with you, and how long do they work with you?
So there's actually quite a few ways. Our program is 100% voluntary, but like I said, I work with dads through all walks of life. So we're out there in the community. We do events. We have an online presence. So it's just a matter of expressing interest. 100% of the dads that express interest, I'm going to be in contact with to follow up. Some dads are in the court system and it's recommended to them from the judge, hey, this is a tool that you could really use. There are some dads that are just really worried about becoming a new father. So, they search out fatherhood programs near me and they find us and we work with them that way. There's some dads going through custody cases and they think the skills that we provide them are going to help them in their custody case. So really there's not a single way dads come to us. We pretty much take all comers, as long as they have a child that aligns in that. And you mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be their first child. They could have a few kids that are older, as long as they have a child that's in that prenatal 3-year-old age range, we'll work with them. And aside from that, we try to have events throughout the year that are open to all fathers, because fatherhood doesn't stop at 3 years old. So
I appreciate that. I do wish there was funding to extend the program beyond 3 years. I know from a clinical perspective, this is what we call that critical window. But you're right. There are fathers that have children of multiple ages, fathers that once they graduate your program may want to continue to be in communion with other dads, because there's power in numbers, right? And so if you are trying to change a habit or a lifestyle or grow yourself personally, to stay connected with those other fathers who have heard the same message, experienced some of the same things, and there's power in that. So I appreciate the ability that Healthy Start is providing you to provide some of those larger open events. I think you have one coming up that's a book club. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
we had our inaugural book club just this past Monday. So relatively small turnout, but that's kind of to be expected with initial things, and especially when we start in the summertime. But we're reviewing a book chapter by chapter. It's actually called The Power of Showing Up. And we just go through it. We discuss what we read in the chapter. And then on top of that, as we progress, we're going to have guest speakers that come in and talk, for example, a financial workshop or a nutrition workshop or things like that, just to help dads put more tools in that toolbox, because sometimes the dads really need that.
Well, I think we all do. And as I think back on some personal experiences, yes, we often refer to maternal mental health, infant mental health, the correlation there. But as mentioned, as I reference back to the Civicon event where a gentleman stood up and said, where are dads in this conversation? That may be overlooked. It may be underrepresented. There may not be as much conversation around that. So one, I'm so glad that we're able to highlight the work that you're doing. But I do think that fathers play a huge role in setting the tone for just kind of what's happening at home around dinner time or bath time or weekends. And they're often co-parenting and maybe joint custody arrangement. So as you mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be 24/7, but being intentional when you are there and present, or being intentional about how you show up is so very important. And I think back to families who may be going through a difficult season, or maybe there's conversation about separation or divorce. This is a powerful outlet, or if you want to look at it from a preventative kind of experience, it could help to keep a marriage together. Have you ever experienced that where a marriage or a living arrangement maybe was chaotic or not stable, and through the work that you've done, maybe brought some families together, united or reunited families?
I haven't personally experienced quite that aspect of it. I have had dads. When we get to the co-parenting aspect, we actually teach how to engage in disagreements. It's one of the things in our curriculum. We teach to stay on the topic, not bring up the past, don't villainize the mother. I think what's most important is if you're not making progress towards a resolution in 15 minutes, then we're going to stop, and because we're no longer productive after that time. So I have had dads use that are in custody, that learn to, there's a lot of introspection, right? And so they realize, I've not been communicating well. I get really angry. Something I personally do is I like to teach dads how to use the I statements. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Dads are in custody battles. If you go to the mother and say, you're always leaving me out of things, that's not received really well. And it's just a simple rephrasing. I feel like I'm being left out. That's really big. It changes the whole context.
Yeah.
And so, we teach things like that just to communicate better. So in that respect, yeah, we have seen some healing, as far as dads and moms communicating a little bit better.
I think anyone listening to this conversation is already taking whether physical notes or mental notes about a couple strategies that you've sprinkled into the conversation. I think we can all benefit from taking a pause, thinking about, is this conversation productive, having ownership over the conversation, and learning when to just pause, redirect, step away from. I think that's very powerful language in and of itself. So thank you for sharing that. We've mentioned curriculum a couple of times. Share with me, where does the curriculum come from?
We use the 24/7 Dad curriculum. It is a curriculum that was put out by the National Fatherhood Initiative. It's used nationwide. A lot of people use it, and there's different iterations of it. There's what we use specifically is 24/7 Dad AM, which is the basics of fatherhood. We're teaching a dad what they need to do to be an engaged father. There are other iterations of it. There's 24/7 Dad PM. They have a program in 24/7 Dad for incarcerated fathers to teach them how to re-engage with their kids once they're released. So it's a really good program. It's very evidence-based. There's a lot of science that goes into it. In Florida, we employ it as a one-on-one. That is actually part of how the program is modeled in Florida, is we go to the dad, we meet them one-on-one. We actually cannot do groups for the curriculum, although I do have dads that sometimes desire that. And that's another reason we do some of our events, because the dads want to meet other dads. But yeah, it's just a really good curriculum. It's made to build. every session builds. And like I mentioned earlier, that those first couple sessions, we're really looking inward and seeing what informed our ideas about fatherhood. And then we move forward as to how we handle ourselves and how we can employ all of that to be a good and engaged father.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to mention, I love the fact that you're using an evidence-based curriculum, so we know that it's clinically sound. Attempts have been made to have a curriculum that meets different cultures, different lifestyles, different backgrounds, so that the fathers engaging in the curriculum are as receptive as the curriculum allows. But then also, when we talked previously, you integrate some of the healthy steps programming as well, like safe sleep practices, car seat safety. So you have some additional education programming that you add to it, as well as the open events where you can allow fathers to meet in more of a group setting, which I think is extremely powerful, and would love to see that part continue. Anything else that you feel like someone listening might need to know or share with them about the work that you do locally?
We're trying to grow all the time. That's part of the reason we do the events. We want to engage dads. I'm working on an alumni program to keep dads engaged and maybe have them participate with some of the dads in the program. I think that's a really good idea. Working on some support groups for dads that need to come back and say, hey, I'm struggling with something, or even dads that don't qualify for the program. Things like that. We're really there for the dads. We really want to be engaged with the dads. I wish I had the stats right in front of me, but it has been scientifically proven that an engaged dad not only creates a better family, a more cohesive family, but they have a positive influence on their communities. And a lot of that is because when you're an engaged dad, you're a role model. And sometimes you're not a role model for just your kids, you're a role model for your kids' friends, or the other people that see you in the community. People see you in the community pushing a stroller, playing with your kid. There's a lot of positivity in that. So.
Yes, I love that. I'm always looking for positive parenting example. We need to see every day, day in, day out, parents being intentional, showing up, eye contact, building language, building positive experiences. I think it's great, the work that you're doing, just really empowering dads to be that role model, to take a lead in investing in their young children. And it doesn't go unnoticed. We need to encourage our dads.
Yeah, and kind of to your point, is dads nurture differently than mothers, and that's really needed in a child's life, because the dads tend to be more physical. They roughhouse a little bit. They teach differently. Dads tend to do more of guiding than teaching. And a rough housing actually teaches kids some problem solving skills, and that's really needed when we don't have that the kids are missing out on skills that they need to learn.
You bring up a really good point, and I just posted earlier this week where I captured an Instagram reel. It was a dad and a young child. They were laying on the floor. There were books scattered about, and they were just giggling so hard about whatever it was in the book. And it's not really about the dad reading the book. Maybe it was just a funny looking cow picture. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But they were engaged in these belly laughs. And every time the dad pointed to something in the book, the young child would just bust out laughing. And I did a stitch where I'm narrating over the reel, talking about dads specifically. Dads keep being goofy and silly and playing because, to your point, they need those experiences. So by design, it's nice for a child to have those different nurturing experiences. We all contribute to a child's life in different ways, and that's really important. Well, I'm going to put in the show notes a way for families to reach out to you. I know on your website there's referral forms there. Also your social, because you're putting on social media, Instagram and Facebook specifically, events that are coming up. I do want to encourage you to stick with the book study. I'm a fan of book clubs and book studies. I think there's great power in aligning around one central focus and then hearing different people's interpretation. I think it's a great vehicle to continue to dig into how people are thinking about and interpreting the world around them. So I'm really excited that you're doing that. Word of mouth is really powerful. And I believe that this podcast and conversations like you're having over time really do raise people's awareness and understanding about what's available to them. Anything else that you want to share before we close?
I love what I do. I love working with the dads. You mentioned the socials. We make it a point every week to, we share fatherhood facts on Wednesday. We share dad jokes on Friday,
Okay.
and any events we're having and anything good that helps the community, we try to put on our page. So just visiting our social media.
And you never know when the message is going to reach the person in that time of need. So we just continue to talk about the good work that's happening. We believe that when we build a brain, we build a life. And when we build lives, we build community. And I think you specifically and the work that you're doing with Team Dad through Healthy Start exemplifies that beautifully. So we want to make sure that we're showcasing, supporting, highlighting, and walking alongside those agencies that are doing really good work in our communities, not only here in Escambia County, but across the state of Florida and nationwide, because they're all of our children and all of our families, and we're in this together. So thank you so much, Chris, for your time today, and look forward to following up and hearing about new things that are happening with Team Dad.
Thank you for listening to The Critical Window. If today's episode sparked new ideas or insights, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it with others. Visit buildabrainnow.com for show notes and resources and to connect with our growing community. Until next time, remember, every interaction shapes a developing brain.